G'day and welcome to another Scott Poynton podcast, and this is one where I am just coming to you absolutely on my own. It's really an interesting situation. I've come out here, I'm in northern Ghana, where I'm working with my Pond Foundation colleagues, and we're establishing some research trials. And it's so beautiful out here, I can't begin to share with you. We're in agricultural fields, but the fields are really agroforests in a way, where all of the fields are dotted with shea trees. And the shea tree, some of you might know, it has nuts that are harvested by women, and they're converted into shea oil, which goes into shea butter, shea oil, which goes into cosmetics and food products all around the world. And this is the region in which it grows. It grows all the way across Africa, but here in Ghana it grows in the north. And the northern dry area, it's about 33 degrees. It's pretty humid because it's the start of the wet season. And as I say, I am totally alone. It's unusual that I'm totally alone because I was out here earlier with about 20 colleagues. Two good mates from Pond Foundation Ghana, my work colleagues, and about, maybe not 20, but 10 to 15 farmers. And we're establishing research trials on farming land in their community to help them learn about biochar. And what's happened is, because it's Friday, they've gone back into the village, to the mosque for Friday prayers. And they asked me to come with them, not to pray. I don't think I'm allowed to go in and pray, but just to come and sit in the community. And I said, look, I'd rather stay out here in the field. We've got there's crops all around me, the shea trees. I'm sitting under the shade of a shea tree. As I say, it's pretty warm, but all of the research trials, we've laid them out. And I wanted to tell you about that because I'm thinking that my listeners in the podcast might be interested. So what is this trial about? And we've got a little while because the Friday prayers last about an hour. They're longer prayers than normal. So we've just got a little time where I can share with you information about what I'm doing out here in this most amazing place. And biochar is an interesting material. Not everyone knows what it is. I think everyone knows what charcoal is. And charcoal is made from wood, and it's made through a process called pyrolysis. And what happens with pyrolysis is that you burn wood at very high temperatures. Well, it doesn't have to be super high. It can be as low as 300 or 400 degrees, I believe, but going up to 700, 800 degrees, so high temperatures in a low oxygen environment. So what happens is that the moisture and a lot of the volatiles and the chemicals that are in wood just get burnt off, and they get burnt off as gases. This is called a syngas, a synthetic gas, and it disperses. And what you end up with, if you leave it for long enough, is a very, very black carbon infrastructure, which you've seen, and we all call charcoal. And you can then burn that carbon if you can get it started. And we've all had problems with our barbecue getting our charcoal started. But once it gets started, it's a lovely slow burn. Now, what's interesting about charcoal is that you can make it with wood, of course, but you can also make it with any agricultural product, any plant material. You can pyrolysize, which means you can burn it at those high temperatures and low oxygen environment. The low oxygen environment is very important because if you have high oxygen, normal oxygen, it just burns to ash. And so you don't end up with a carbon infrastructure. All you end up with is white powdery ash, which is the sort of stuff. Oh, we've got some chickens going off here. Don't know if you can hear that. But we've got the chickens have come by to see what I'm up to. But if as you see in your fireplace, when you burn your fire or your barbecue, you get a lot of white powdery ash, and that is when there's a lot of oxygen. So if you burn it without oxygen, all of these liquids and other chemicals burn off, and you end up with a carbon infrastructure, right? But you can do that with any plant-based material. You can do it with wood, as we know with charcoal. You can do it with any agricultural product, and that's what we've been doing here with the farmers here in northern Ghana. Now, why would we do that? Why is this interesting for the farmers? Well, because traditionally they use fossil fuel fertilizers, what we call NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium fertilizers. Those are made from fossil fuels, and there's a lot of carbon emissions associated with them. But they've also got a lot of sort of salts and unpleasant things in them. And so when you put a lot of it on your field, it kills all of the microbiome, all of the bacteria and the fungi and certainly the worms, all of these little creatures that help bring life to our soil and help our crops grow well, these things all die with excessive and repeated application of NPK, fossil fuel fertiliser. And what's happened here over so many years is that the farmers, and already not very high quality soils here, very sandy soil, some clay. Someone's coming by looking at me talking to myself with this thing, and they're wondering what I'm doing. It's so funny. Entre. Nah. Yeah. So what happens with the... they're not used to seeing a white person out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of their farmland. So it's a young woman, she's stopped to pick up the shea nuts. She's harvesting shea nuts, which is that's another, as I mentioned, the shea trees. This is harvest time now for the shea trees, and the women and young girls go out into the field and they pick up the shea nuts, take them into their village, put them through a process that eventually sees the shea butter being sold in the market and also sold out to export, as I mentioned. So she's wandering by collecting shea nuts, saying, "Who is this white guy talking to himself in the middle of our agricultural lands?" But anyway, there we are. Back to the biochar. So yeah, they've been putting on NPK fertiliser here for such a long time that the soils are really dead. Not great soil quality initially, but yeah, the soils are really devoid of life. I've been coming here now for 3 years, working with the farmers, and I've seen many ploughed fields, and I've only ever seen one earthworm. Now, to be fair, maybe there weren't many earthworms here before, but there surely are not many now. And the farmers complain about the impact of the fertiliser on their soils. The other thing that's happening is that because the soils are dead, they need to put on the NPK, otherwise they don't get many yields. So it's a vicious cycle, and it means they put on more NPK to get the basic minimum yield. But of course, what has happened is that the price of the fertiliser has gone up, what with the Ukraine war, and the farmers can no longer afford it. So they're growing their crops without any fertiliser on poor soils that are devoid of life because of the fertiliser, and as a result of this, their yields are going down. Now, on top of that, we have a problem with climate change. And with climate change here, not only are the temperatures going up, but the rainfall, which is so critical for the crops, has become so much more erratic. I don't know how long ago, but in traditional times, the farmers could more or less tell you that the day the rains were going to start, that it would rain from that point on every 3 or 4 days through to the end of the season at the end of October, and they could set their watches by the onset of the rains, and that they could plant their crops with great confidence, knowing that the rains would come and the crops would be fine. That's not the case over the last probably 10 to 15 years, as I understand it. The rains have been coming far more infrequently. They don't start when they used to start, and sometimes when they start, they stop. So when the rains start and the farmers think it's time to plant their crops, they go out, plough their fields, plant their crops, and then the rains stop. So it's still very hot at that point in April and May. It's still 38, 39 degrees. And when there's no water in the soil, these soils are very free draining, so the water goes away very quickly. The crops die. And the farmers are desperately poor here, so they don't have a lot of money to buy seed. So when they buy seed and plant it, and the crop fails because the rain doesn't come, this is a disaster. They've got to go out and buy more seed. And last year was a great example of this terrible unfolding, where they had to plant 3 times. They planted once, thinking the rainy season had arrived, then the rains didn't come again for 6 weeks, so all of their crops died. They planted again, thinking the rains had arrived, and then the rain stayed away for another 6 weeks. So they had to plant a 3rd time. And by this stage, it was the middle of August. And what they were hoping was that the end of the rainy season would be extended into November, giving them a full growing season. But it didn't happen. And so they had a very short growing season. The rains ended in mid-October, as they normally do. And that means that the crops didn't have a full growing season. So the farmers had a very poor year last year in terms of their yields. This is critically important for the farmers because they grow food here for themselves, but also for export. They send it down to Accra, the capital in the south, for the people there, but also for export. And so what happens is they harvest them in November, they start selling them in December to get some money, they hold some to speculate a little bit on the market, so if they hold some back, the prices go up a bit and they sell it. But usually by January and February, they've sold their crops, they've kept some over to eat for themselves, and then they're suffering the dry season. The dry season really starts in December, and it goes through all the way until the rains first arrive, usually around the end of April. And what happens up here is that the people don't have enough food. Now, generally they have enough calories because, as well as all the cereal crops, they grow yams and cassava. These are big starch-filled roots. And this is their food to get them through the dry season. They have enough calories. The yam and the cassava are full of calories, but they're 98% carbohydrates. And so that people don't get all the nutrients they need in their diet. And as a consequence of this, the children in particular suffer. Up here in the northern region, there's northern region, upper east region, and upper west region. There was a paper published, I think it was 2018 or 2019, that reported that 38 or 39% of the children 0 to 5 years old in the 3 northern regions were stunted. Their mental and physical growth was stunted, and that's because they're just not getting enough food. So all of these things, the soils being dead and the yields going down, the farmers not being able to afford fertiliser that even if they did would kill their soils even more, degrade their soils even more, the changing rainfall patterns, all of these things are leading to desperation for the farmers. And they're amazing people. It lifts my soul and my spirit every time I come out here to meet them, because they're battling away. You know, they're young people, tend to go down south to Accra. Many try to migrate north, taking the dangerous journey to try and cross the Mediterranean Sea to get to Europe, where often, you know, they are, well, even in Accra, they're treated very badly. The people in the north here, you know, they go down to the south. If they're lucky, the men get jobs as porters, the women get jobs as maids. There's all sorts of sexual abuse, and I don't want to say racism, that's probably too strong a word, but certainly disrespect. They have derogatory terms for the people from the north. And often the young people come back, sometimes the women with HIV, the young men too, with children, with babies, having been raped, and they come back into their communities and struggle to survive. It's very grim, it's very sad. I don't want to make it sound like it's universal. When I come out here, you know, you don't see that on the surface. We're dealing with the farmers and their families. You don't see a lot of young people because they've all gone either into Tamale, the main city. Not all, but many of them have gone into the main city, particularly the women, because the women don't get access to land out here. This is a Muslim area. As I said, the men have gone in for their Friday prayers. This is a Muslim area, and the land is all, in inverted commas, owned and farmed by the men. The chief gives it out to the men. The women don't get access to land. And even the young men are finding that, you know, the farming here doesn't make much of a return. So a lot of them are going, are seeking the migration route to Tamale, which is the main city here in the north, and down into Accra. And then, as I say, some of them are taking the risk, the perilous risk, to travel to Europe. But that's the men, where they do have access to land. The women do not. And so there's a lot of desperation, I think, amongst the young women. There's not much schooling out here. The government school system doesn't really serve these remote rural communities. So all a bit of a challenge. And that brings us back to the biochar. And what am I doing sitting here on a bag of manure, surrounded by chickens and with young people walking past, picking up the shea nuts, looking at this crazy guy talking to himself. The chickens are looking at me saying, what's he doing? Why am I out here? Well, that's because we believe at Pond Foundation, and I believe after my many, many years of work in rural areas, mostly in forestry, that biochar could be an answer to some of these problems. And here's why. What's amazing about the biochar is that it's a carbon infrastructure. So it's got many, many millions of holes in it, millions of little pores where all of the liquids and the chemicals have been evaporated off, been burned off through the pyrolysis process, and you're just left with a carbon infrastructure. And that's sort of carbon lattices, all overlaid on each other. And as a consequence, there's millions of little holes and pores in the biochar. So it's like a massive sponge. And so when it rains, all of the water through the surface tension gets held in the biochar. So if you put biochar on your field, it's going to hold a lot more water. The water won't all run away. Now, what's interesting also about these pores that are present in the biochar is that also all the little bacteria and the fungi can go in there and find safe haven. And they breed in there, and they can then go out into the soil. And so the water in the biochar not only serves to be a big sponge and a source of water for the plant's roots, it brings life back to the soil. So that's quite amazing. But we've done some trials here in 2022. We did a small trial where we planted Bambara bean. I was here then for a project growing Bambara beans. And we found across 17 different fields, we got an average of 26% yield increase just by putting biochar with the Bambara beans. We didn't put fertiliser, we didn't put manure, we didn't put compost. We literally just put biochar. And I think the mechanism by which that yield was increased is mostly because of the water, because it holds onto the water, and the Bambara roots, the plant roots, could get into that water. And in times of mini droughts, it might be 3 or 4 days or even a week where the rains don't come, the plants don't fall into stress and don't die, so they can carry on growing. That's the big impact of biochar. There's one small other positive impact of biochar, and that is it's generally very alkali. So, we've got some thunder coming. We might get some rain this afternoon. Hopefully we can get our trials established before it pours rain. Yeah, the other thing is it's very alkali. And so when you put it in these acidic soils, these soils up here are very, well, not very acidic, but they can be as low as pH 5. And so when you put the biochar on with pH 9 or 10, it increases the amount of phosphorus that's available. And phosphorus is a critical nutrient for plant growth. So between the moisture, the increased phosphorus, the increasing biome, we're starting to make the soils a better place for plant growth. And I think that was the mechanism that we saw when the Bambara did so well. Now, the other trial we did was with corn, and that was in 2023. The chickens are coming around in 2023. And we put biochar, corn and biochar, and we got a 22% yield increase. But when we put corn, biochar and chicken manure, we got a 98% yield increase on the corn. We doubled the yield for the farmers. Quite extraordinary. Well, let me say it wasn't for the farmers. It was on a research trial, and that was one of the problems. The farmers didn't get to see it. And so what we've done this year, was very grateful to have received some funding from a very kind Norwegian foundation. They love the idea of biochar, and like many people, they can see that biochar could be a solution to part of the solution, let's say. There's no one solution to these challenges that the farmers here face, but biochar could really help them. As the temperatures increase, the rains get more erratic, putting more and more biochar in the soil is really valuable. And there's another thing I haven't mentioned yet. The beautiful thing about the biochar is that if it's well made, and there's some tests you can do for that, and the biochar we've been making with the farmers is very good quality biochar, it will stay in the soil for at least 1,000 years. So not like fertiliser, when you put it on, it's gone within 3 weeks, and so much of it just washes away. When you put the biochar on the soil, it will stay in the soil for 1,000 years. So next year when you put some more, it just adds to it, it adds to it, it adds to it. And so you're building up the soil's capacity to hold water. And we believe that this will be vital in supporting the farmers in the future as the rains get even more erratic and less. Less rainfall, coming in more intensive events. We believe this biochar is going to help hold the soils together. So, yeah, as the farmers put this biochar, we think it could be a big game changer for them. And so, having established these research trials that we did, our Norwegian donor has kindly said, we want to see how this unfolds. Can we help you to make more biochar, to support the farmers, to teach them how to make it themselves, and to set up some research trials so that we can demonstrate its value? And I started talking about that at the start of the podcast, and that's exactly why I'm here. With our team, we've been making some biochar, and we've been teaching the farmers how to do it themselves because they can make it from their own agricultural waste. When I first came here to Ghana in November 2021, it was harvest season, and the farmers were burning all of their peanut shells, their corn cobs, their soy straw, their rice straw. All of these things were just being burnt in the field just to get rid of them. And I said to the farmers, why don't you make biochar? And they said, well, what's biochar? And so started that journey to help the farmers understand what biochar is. I wouldn't be surprised if their grandparents or their great-grandparents made biochar, but with the promise of the fertilisers, the green revolution, the lobbying of the fertiliser companies with the governments and NGOs, everyone's come out here and said, use fertiliser, plough your fields, use fertiliser. And of course, this intensive agriculture has led us to where we are today with destroyed soils. So I wouldn't be surprised if their ancestors made biochar, but by the time I got here, they'd forgotten, had no knowledge of what it was. Maybe in other parts of Ghana, I'm sure they did, but up here where I'm working in the northern region, they didn't know. And so we started that program to teach them how to make it, and we're continuing it this year. And here we are, we're sitting here, we've got our trial where we've got 2 different applications of biochar, one a sort of higher amount, one a lower amount. We've got biochar and manure. We've got biochar and NPK fertiliser because we wanted to show the farmers might say, oh, we could just get the same effect with NPK if we could afford it. So we want to show them that you can add biochar with NPK and you'll get exactly the same yield as with manure and you won't kill your soils. That's what we're hoping. Let's wait and see what the results produce when we harvest our trials later in the year in October or November. We've got an NPK treatment on its own because we want to be able to show the farmers how the biochar compares with the NPK. We've got a control, and that's it, yeah. So 7 treatments, let's say. Control, biochar at a low application, biochar at a high application, manure on its own, biochar manure, and NPK and biochar NPK. We've got it in 10 by 10 metre plots, 3 replications, and on 6 different sites in 6 different communities. And I can tell you what, it's a bit hard work setting these things up. It's pretty warm out here. It's not the peak of the temperature, which happens really around February, March, April. It's about 33 degrees out here today, but it's quite humid. And as I say, I just had a bit of thunder. We've got some clouds building over there. I hope the team get back from the mosque soon because it'll take us another little while, maybe another hour or 2 before we can finish establishing the trial here. We don't really want to be doing it in the pouring rain. So let's see. But that's the story from northern Ghana. And, you know, it's just wonderful for me to be out here with the chickens. I'm not alone anymore. The young lass who was harvesting the shea nuts, she's been sitting away from me about 30 metres. She's wandering by now. She's been watching this crazy white guy doing this recording. Well, she's come over right close now. She's gathering some shea nuts near me. It's just a privilege for me to be out here after decades spent in sustainability on forests. It's just a pleasure to be able to work here. I really wanted to work more in agriculture and in climate change as well, but agriculture is responsible for so many of the world's carbon emissions. And so whilst so many millions of hectares have been protected as a result of the work that I did helping companies set up no deforestation commitments, those forests are still burning, and they're burning because of climate change. So if we don't tackle the massive amounts of carbon emissions that's coming from climate change, which is predominantly because of fertiliser use, we won't be able to keep ourselves below. Everyone keeps talking about 1.5 degrees Celsius, but I think we're going to blow past 1.5 degrees Celsius. We've got to keep it as low as possible. But it's not just about climate change. It's really also about supporting the farmers here to adapt to climate change and cope with climate change as it impacts their lives and the lives of children. We've got another program with Pond Foundation here called Hillary's Kids, where we support the communities with education, water, sanitation and health, equipment and infrastructure, because the government isn't able to do that up here in these regions. So what we provide is only a small amount of support, but it's the support that we can provide. So yeah, between the work we're doing in the research trials and the Hillary's Kids program, and Hillary's Kids is named after my wonderful colleague from TFT, the Forest Trust, my previous foundation, Hilary Thompson, who devoted her life to supporting people in the global south, I would say, and particularly children, particularly young women, but also young boys and men as well. Hilary tried to help everyone. Unfortunately, she passed away from cancer in 2019. And when I started Pond Foundation, I pledged to her family that I would do what I can to carry on her legacy. And so we have Hillary's Kids program to support the communities here in whatever way we can. So that's my story today from northern Ghana. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about that and hearing about the story of biochar. You'll hear a lot more about biochar, I'm sure. I believe that it really can help in mitigating the impacts of climate change for smallholder farmers around the world. There are 2.5 billion smallholder farmers around the world, pretty much all of them living in abject poverty. So if we can help them not be reliant on fossil fertiliser companies and learn how to make the biochar themselves, probably a long-forgotten technique that they knew anyway. There's biochar being unearthed in the Amazon rainforest, more than 4,000 years old, that was made those thousands of years ago by the indigenous people there. So biochar is an ancient technology. It's not a new discovery. We're just bringing it back to where I'm sure it probably was before. So we're excited about that. When I come back in October, November, I'll let you know how we've gone with the results. We need to analyse them all. But we've got our fingers crossed that what we're going to see here is a great outcome, and the farmers will be excited about the biochar. And come November, when they've harvested their crops, instead of burning all of the waste like the peanut shells and all the straws, that they'll make it into biochar and they'll get it on their fields, and they'll start that journey themselves with our support to bringing life back to their soils, to their children, to their families, to their communities, and not going through so much hardship that we've seen. And who knows, it might even help stem the tide of migration away from their communities to places where they're mistreated. So who thought that a little bit of application of a bit of burnt peanut shells could make such a difference in so many people's lives? Thanks very much for listening, and I'll keep you posted on the wonder of biochar.